Hello and welcome to the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Lisandro Kaunitz and Javier Kreiner. Thank you very much for joining me, guys. Before we get into this episode, make sure you follow us on Twitter @BettingPod and check out the website businessofbetting.com. Guest suggestions are much appreciated. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Betfair Proprietary Limited. Betfair operates a betting exchange and is licensed in the Northern Territory of Australia. Residents of Australia can join Betfair by visiting betfair.com.au and support this podcast by using promo code BOBPOD. Please gamble responsibly. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Lisandro Kaunitz and Javier Kreiner. Thank you very much for joining me, guys.
Hello,
Hi, Jake. Thanks for having us.
This will be fun. I came across your research paper entitled Beating the Bookies with Their Own Numbers and How the Online Sports Betting Market is Rigged. And I thought I'd love to chat with you both about the paper and your backgrounds and how you got into it. So why don't we start with your backgrounds, and we can start with you, Lisandro.
Okay. I studied in Buenos Aires. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I was born and raised there. I studied psychology. And I'm a cognitive neuroscientist. Or at least I was a cognitive neuroscientist up to very recently. And I did a PhD in Italy, in Trento. And then some postdocs in the UK, Australia, in Melbourne, and in Japan. And now I live in Japan. And I worked for a tech company here in Tokyo. So basically, yeah, my background is cognitive neuroscience, and now I work in a project to assist the visually impaired to navigate the world. A bit different, but using my expertise there.
Yes. What about you, Javier?
Yeah, I'm also from Argentina, from Buenos Aires. I am a mathematician and also a computer scientist. I studied at the University of Buenos Aires, and then I went to Europe, to Edinburgh, and Italy to continue my studies, and I did some neuroscience. That's how I met Lisandro, to some research in neuroscience. And then nowadays I'm working for a fintech company that does lending for small and medium-sized business in Latin America. It's called Impressify. Yeah, that's what I do nowadays.
So, Javier, your background sounds more in line with creating mathematical models to approach the sports betting market. Did you both come up with the idea, or did you have some initial interest given your mathematics background?
Well, the original idea was actually from Lisandro, and he is also more into football, and that's how it got started. He kick-started it. I just he told me about it, and we started looking into it. At the beginning, we didn't know if it would work or if we would reach some results, right? I did most of the programming, or some of the programming, but the analysis and everything was together.
So, Lisandro, what made you look into this area and want to do research as you've done?
Yes, I've never wanted to do research on this area. So I like football. Argentina, in Argentina, everyone is a football fan. It's soccer for the US, but football, as we call it in the rest of the world. And I suppose I started with this project. Well, I started before Melbourne, but it developed while I was in Melbourne. I was having some difficulties in my research, and I suppose I was a bit bored. And I found this project very interesting or amusing in my spare time. And it grew from there, and then I shared this project with Javier, and we said, we could analyze this data and see these patterns. And it started to work out somehow. And there's a third person who contributed to the paper, which is Shen-Shung Song. He's in Melbourne. He's a PhD student at Monash in Melbourne. And also I started with him, talking to him and discussing these ideas with him. And this is how it grew. So we never set our goal to say, okay, let's do research on football betting. It was a side project.
Okay, so I'm going to do my best to summarize what I thought were the key components from your research paper, and please let me know if I've made a good fist of having an accurate summary. So from the paper, it mentions our results demonstrate that the football betting market is inefficient. Bookmakers can be consistently beaten across thousands of games in both simulated environments and real-life betting. The sports betting market is rigged against successful bettors through discriminatory practices, and the inefficiencies are compensated by these restrictive practices. Is that a good analysis or summary from my perspective, or have I missed some of the key parts?
I think so. I think it's pretty good. Yes.
I just wanted to sort of put the main sort of ideas out there as we begin. And if anyone wants to access this paper, I suggest they go online and read it. They can go on Lisandro's blog and find it. I'll put a link to it as well so people can easily find it. From the very beginning, when you got started with this paper, obviously we just went through exactly what the final results might be. What component did you think was going to be the most difficult or most time-consuming in order to prepare this research and ultimately place bets on the online betting market?
I think that there were some technical challenges about setting up the data collection machinery and so getting the service up and running and maintaining them running all the time and that nothing goes wrong, and then do it for many months until we collected enough data and were sure that our strategy was working. Well, that's from the technical side, right? So, but then there was also a human side in which we had to actually put the bets. Once we had our strategy and we had our dashboards and we were sure that what we were doing made sense. So that meant staying many hours or standing guard in front of the computer, looking at the opportunities that came and go to each bookie and bet the right amount, etc. Those were some of the challenges we had.
So taking it back to the very beginning then, in very simple terms, if you can, explain the strategy that you came up with that led to the dashboard, that led to the bets coming through. What was the underlying approach, and describing that in very general terms for those who may not have read the paper in detail?
Well, the strategy basically looks for bets which have a positive expected value. We look at the odds and we have an estimate of the probability. For example, let's say Barcelona plays against Real Madrid, and we construct, based on the odds in the whole market, an estimate probability of the result coming. So if Barcelona winning against Real Madrid, we say, okay, the probability is, 55%. And then we look at all the odds offered, and we see if any of those odds pays more than it should, given that probability. That's basically the approach.
Take us through your method of calculating the probability of the Barcelona to win, for example. What did you do that was unique? I know you aggregated bookmakers' odds, but just take us through the process of doing that and what led you to do that instead of what most people will do and create their own models.
Well, the reason we did that was that we noticed that the average odd or the collective odds in the market were very good predictors of the result of the game, or the odds or the probability of the event. So to speak, the Barcelona winning against Real Madrid, those odds that were published were a very good predictor. And in the end, we didn't need to construct our own model. So that's the reason we didn't do it. And so we collect the odds from all the bookmakers, do sort of an average. And with that, we have to adjust the probability by a small number, because we have to take into account that the odds have inside of them the cost of the bookmakers make a margin out of the odds like they, so they pay a bit less than they should, right, in general. So you have to adjust for that. And then once you have the probability, you look at all the odds published and see if any of those odds, for some reason, is above what they should pay.
So you're using a version of wisdom of the crowds, or wisdom of the bookmakers, which obviously their prices contain a lot of information from the market. I guess one quick question on that, which is probably looking forward a little bit, but the analysis was that the the betting markets are inefficient, or the football betting markets can be inefficient and can be exploited. In saying that, it's balancing that with using the bookmakers' odds or aggregated average bookmakers' odds, let's say. There needs to be a balance between the markets being ultimately inefficient and able to be exploited, and then also using the bookmakers' odds themselves and the wisdom of the crowds as your baseline. Did you think about how that might be counterintuitive, or were you okay with that?
It seems counterintuitive, but I don't think it is. It's the bookmakers. What we didn't discover it. This is something I would say many professional gamblers they know, is that the mean of the closing odds is one of the most accurate. It's a very accurate estimator of the probability of the outcome of the game. So if bookmakers say there's 50% chance, or if they pay 2 that Barcelona will win, and Barcelona plays that game 1,000 times, 50% of the time the result ends with the Barcelona win. So when you see this in a lot of games, as we did, I mean, we just said, okay, they have an excellent model. In my opinion, that's an excellent model of prediction. So how can you beat that? I mean, you need more. One way is to have more information than they have about the games. But we said, no way. I mean, how are we going to have new or more information about each game than bookmakers? So we thought, okay, then the way out of doing that is just finding value, finding other bookmakers who pay more than what they should, based on these mean closing odds. And then the market inefficient. So the model is very accurate. There are models, but bookmakers, there's variance in the odds. They need to offer different odds. And in that sense, I think we said it's an inefficiency in the market. There's variance there.
Yeah, definitely. No, I completely understand. One question I had reading through was, what was your thought process when you're calculating what the aggregated bookmaker odds should be to identify the chances of either team winning, let's say? You mentioned then that the closing line or the starting price is, the best indicator. Obviously, the match wouldn't have started and you wanted to place a bet, or did you only bet during the games? Because I guess if you wanted to have the closing line, you can't get that until the match starts. And if you wanted to bet pre-match, I think you mentioned 5 hours before, up to 1 hour before the match. How did you calculate what you think the closing line might be in advance of that happening?
We used what you said, but we didn't predict. We just noticed that it was pretty close. So a few hours before the start of the game, the odds were already pretty close to the closing line, and we did simulations for many thousands of games to see if it worked betting with the odds like 5 hours before the start of the game, and it did. So we didn't have to actually bet when the game was going on, but a little bit before.
I see. I want to talk a little bit about your backtesting approach. Obviously, you probably collected a lot of data or had a lot of data that you could use. Take us through how rigorous your backtesting was and how important it is from a data science perspective to make sure that backtesting is done in a meaningful way.
Yeah, well, the data we collected, which, by the way, everything is online and everyone can use it and download it and do their own analysis. We have put it in GitHub and also in Kaggle. There's a data set where we put, and there was also the code that we used to analyze and do everything that we did. Your question was why do you think our analysis is accurate, and we were sure that we could start betting for real, right?
Yeah, why didn't you just start betting on day one and not do any backtesting? Why is backtesting so critical?
Yeah, that's critical.
Yeah, well, that's pretty important. Yeah. So because we are scientists and we have that background, and until we're not sure of that a hypothesis is true, we won't start betting, right? We wanted to be extremely sure that what we thought was right, and the only way to be sure is to look at a lot of data from the past. And in this case, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of games, right? So many hundreds of thousands of games, and a strategy that we back tested. It's hundreds of thousands of games for I think it was 10 years, or between 5 and 10 years.
Yeah. Almost 500,000 games.
And then we sort of refined our back testing, because this first 500,000 games were for closing odds. But then we needed to have what you mentioned, that, how do you know that the closing, or how do you approximate the closing odds from odds before? And then what we had to do was to collect the odds on an ongoing basis. So start collecting we did that for 6 months, where we look at the odds at every moment, and we collect that in our database, and we back test more precisely, taking into account that we cannot bet at the moment of the start of the match knowing the closing odds, but we will have to do it a bit earlier.
So basically, there was a scrapper. There was a program collecting odds continuously, and it was giving alerts to us, and we could do simulations on how those odds would do in real life. We would simulate placing a bet, and then waiting for the game to end, and then calculating the outcome.
Bootstrap analysis. You took random sample of games as well throughout your testing. Take us through that, and it's obviously a very rigorous process, a very necessary scientific process to ensure the hypothesis is correct. And I know that sports bettors out there will have hypotheses themselves. They'll go back and test them. I don't think they'll go in as much detail as you, I'm guessing. So just take us through what the bootstrap analysis means in simple terms, and also why you took random samples of games as well. And I know there was basically the outcome was that there was more than 10 standard deviations above the mean. So just take us through some of that.
Actually, what the model we constructed didn't have many trainable parameters. Actually, there was only one parameter to train. So what we did was we didn't test many values of these. There's one parameter that talks about what's the margin of the bookie, of the bookies, right? And that's the only parameter that we use that is, in quotes, trainable. But we actually didn't overfit to that parameter, because we just took a few possible values that we thought were reasonable, and it works. In general, it works for every parameter, but there's a trade-off when you modify this parameter. If you put it too high, then you have less matches. If you put it too low, then you don't win so much for each bet, or the expected value of the bet is not so positive. But answering your question, from our analysis, which was took into account many thousands of games, hundreds of thousands of games, we were very sure about, that the strategy would work. So I told you about two steps of the analysis. First, we took the closing odds of 400,000 games, and then we did the same analysis, but not with the closing odds, but with odds a few hours before the start of the match. And then we did paper trading. So we set up all the systems where we had dashboard, and we actually started saying, we will bet in this, and we will bet here and here and here, and we did that for several months. And after that process of simulation, in which we simulated what we will actually be doing when we started our strategy for real, we also had good results, and that increased our confidence in what we were doing, and then we started betting for real.
Yeah, I would say one thing. So in science, when you have an effect, so if you're studying any process or if you do an experiment, you want to be sure your results are not due to chance. So in our case, we wanted to be sure that if we placed bets 1 to 5 or 8 hours before the game, in the end we did 1 to 5, but we tested also 1 to 8 and 1 to 10. We wanted to be sure that if we were earning money, it was not due to chance. And it's very easy to be deceived, to deceive yourself into believing that you have something when it's just noise. So to do that, we simulated many games in which we just picked randomly a bet and placed a bet to the maximum odd offered on that game. And what we saw is that our strategy was making money, and all these strategies were always losing money. So and it was very consistent, the result. And we said, okay, this is not chance. This is going to work. I think that's when we said, okay, this is going to work in real life. And then, as Javier said, we tried paper trading, and it was also working.
You see the numbers. You want more control. On the Betfair exchange, you can back, lay, trade, and set your own odds. So join the world's largest peer-to-peer betting platform. Get into the game within the game at betfair.com.au. Gamble responsibly.
What about when you started actually trading? Obviously, there's simulation and there's analysis you can do. What about take us through the results of the actual trading from that perspective, and then I want to talk about some of the challenges of actually doing it afterwards.
Yeah, that was the exciting part, I would say. So at this moment, we said, okay, we did all this analysis and we had all this data, and then suddenly we said, okay, this is going to work. I remember I was like, yes, it's going to work. So then we said, why don't we do it in real life? And that's when we had to set up a whole system of alerts. And you need to know when these bets are coming. And you need to be fast because the odds change all the time. And so that's when we started the logistics of betting.
We also had to open accounts with many bookmakers because, as we told you before, the opportunities appear in specific bookmakers, and you need to have an account with that specific bookmaker to be able to take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, well, and then we had several challenges to do that. Basically, the first challenge is that you need to be able to do the scripts, or you need to program and get the data from different sources and put them in the dashboard. We were showing them in the dashboard. The dashboard we made it public online. It's also in the GitHub, so we could follow the odds. Then you need to open the accounts, and then Katya, my wife, basically she stayed many hours in front of the computer in the week, and I was doing it mainly also during the weekends. So that's also very, very challenging. You need a lot of hours in front of the computer. We didn't automate the whole process because it takes a lot. It would take a lot of time to do this automatically, and it's very difficult to do. So it had to be done manually.
So what Lisandro means that we did not automate the actual betting.
I see.
So putting the bets in each bookmaker was manual.
Okay. So how did you go?
Well, it went well in the beginning. As we expected, we were making money. That was also very exciting. I have to say it's very fun, at least in the beginning, to bet online. We started to win and earn money, but very fast we started to be blocked by bookmakers. So in some cases, after we had a strike of good luck, some other times it just from the beginning it didn't wait. It didn't wait much. So then we started to be blocked, limited. Most of the time it's not blocked, but they just limited our amounts, the amounts we could bet. So we had decided on a bet of $50. So for each game we betted $50. And what happened is that sometimes we wanted to place a bet and they said, no, you can't bet 50, you can bet 11.34. I remember this.
Or 57 cents.
Yeah, 57 cents. It was these weird numbers, is why 11.34. And this started to discourage us. So after we were limited by 7 or 8 bookmakers, we said, okay, no, we felt it was a waste of time, basically.
Did you expect any of that to happen? Did you anticipate that perhaps if you were betting at, close to closing line or even beating the closing line or winning over time, even if it is $50 bets, that you would be shut down or restricted like you were?
Yes and no. So this is, as I said before, we were very naive. We are very naive with respect to betting. We're not professional gamblers. So my guess was that, we're going to get limited. But I thought, this is a big market. We are placing $50. We thought it was okay. It was not $1,000 each bet. So we said, maybe we can make $1,000 to $2,000 on each account. That was my miscalculation. I said, okay, so we can make money with this. We could bet, earn $1,000 to $2,000 for each account, and then if we get shut down, well, then we have Javier. He can do the same with his account, and Katya could do the same with her account. But that didn't happen. We were banned from very fast, almost from the beginning sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes we couldn't even put a single bet. So, want to put your first bet? No, sorry, you cannot do that.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question is then, what was more difficult in your mind? Was it putting together the research and the model and doing the back testing? Or was it actually executing and deploying your betting strategy and trying to manually place bets, manually avoid being restricted and doing those things?
It's a difficult question.
I mean, the analysis and the data connection took us, I think, between 1 and 2 years. So that was a long time, but it was fun and we were doing something we are used to doing in science, and so and then I think for us the most challenging part was probably the part when we started betting for real. So you have to open the different accounts, transfer money, and then stay many hours in front of the computer doing repetitive work because you have to look for the opportunity and that's not something that's very fun.
It's fun in the beginning. It's fun in the
beginning. But then it's just, and then the frustration of the fact that they start bluffing you, and some of them even at the very beginning, as we said, and we're not talking about small bookmakers here. Some of the biggest bookmakers just, for some reason, at the very beginning, very first bet, or the second bet, just they block you on you cannot bet.
Yeah, that was a bit frustrating also because in our paper it's very clear. So for our strategy to work, which is a very simple strategy, but for this strategy to work, you need a lot of games. So if they give you, I don't know, 50 games a month, unless you can bet a lot of money on them and you have a lot of money in your bank account because things can go wrong for 500 to 600 games. We saw this in our simulation. So you need to be ready to lose money consistently and then you will win eventually. But with these very few games, it wouldn't work. So it was the end. When we saw that, we said, this is not, it will never work in real life.
So for the statistics to kick in, you need hundreds of games, right? And then, of course, if you could put an arbitrary sized bet, then it would have worked, right? Because if you put the $1,000 bet, well, we would have multiplied our winnings by 20.
Yes, so, but you need enough money to back the bad
of course.
breaks. So when things go wrong and you lose 8 games in a row, you need.
Yeah, well, in reality, that didn't happen to us, and there are some streaks during the simulation that it might happen, but in general, that would be very bad luck. And if you have just you allowed for enough money to be able to withstand this starting bad luck, if you have it, then the strategy should work from the simulations.
So did it leave any unanswered questions for you, or did it raise any unanswered questions? And I guess one I might have is, did you consider using betting exchanges instead of bookmakers? Any things like that were, I guess, in the analysis post the bets being placed and shutting down the betting, were there any aspects that were unanswered from your perspective?
Questions regarding the industry. I think Lisandro has many questions about that.
Yes, I have some questions about the industry. To answer first your question, we used Betfair in our simulations. So what we call Bookies, we collected data from Betfair, but we never thought of using it consistently. There are not many opportunities, I think, with this strategy. I think most people betting in Betfair, they know about the closing odds. So no, we didn't consider that. Also, it was a matter of amount of games. I think that's why we didn't go there. And for the unanswered questions, we have discussions and we exchange emails and comments with a lot of people since we put the paper online. Some from the industry, some people working for bookmakers. And we were arguing against and in favor of this idea of, is the market rigged or not? And I think that's it could be a matter of opinion, but one unanswered question to us is, what's the proportion of successful gamblers that are out there? How many people, how many clients from the bookmakers, from the online bookmakers, which is what we did in our paper, are able to make profit, sustainable profit with their betting? And we asked this question to some of these people, and they couldn't give us an answer. So to me, this is a big question to me. What's the business of betting for the clients of the betting industry?
Do you have a sense of what the answer might be, or you are truly unsure and throwing it out into the world to see if there is a better approach or answer?
Yeah, we actually don't actually know the answer to this question. So we suppose that not so many, because the industry also has to maintain itself and make a profit. So, but we are not sure. This is a legitimate question. We don't know.
How many people are there, and also how difficult it is to become what people call professional gamblers, or I don't know what that means exactly, but I have no idea how much money can a professional gambler do or make in his life. So in our experience, we were blocked very, very fast. And we saw online that this is the case very often. So, for example, you had Peter Webb in one of your podcasts before, and he has a video on YouTube in which he explains how he was blocked from the bookies. And he was not using online bookies. He was going into the bookie shop, and he was blocked in the UK. And there are many cases like this online. So, I don't know, to me it seems very difficult. And unless you have someone who lets you bet and doesn't limit you, it's very difficult. If you have someone that doesn't limit you, then they will know about the closing odds. So then you need to beat those models. And as we said, I think they are amazingly accurate at predicting the football games.
Yeah, no, one thing I certainly took away from reading through your research paper was that you mentioned before it's a simple strategy. It may seem simple now after you've done it, but I'm guessing going through the process of the research, the analysis, you said it might have been 1 or 2 years, putting together the model, back testing it rigorously to make sure that in those simulations of nearly 500,000 games that it's successful, and then paper trading, and then actual trading, and then when you start actual trading, you need to set up accounts, try and place bets. When you do that, it's great. When you get blocked, it's another challenge. So I guess it just shows the overarching challenge. And then you even touched on some of the bankroll management aspects. If you have a losing run in the beginning, you need to have enough bankroll to sustain that. So I think that one of the main elements it showed for me was there's so many different complicated and challenging aspects that go into. Even if you think it's a simple strategy, I would say it's a very difficult, rigorous process from start to finish, and there's a lot of challenges along the way.
Exactly.
Well, yes. There are technical challenges there. Yes. So with this, I've written this in my blog post. So this raises another question, which is it worth it? I don't know. If you're very passionate about sports and you are a data scientist and this is what you want to do in life, I would say, okay, and you find the way not to be limited in your account, I would say, yes, it's worth it. If not, to us, it was not worth it. So it was not worth the effort. It was fun, but...
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I'm guessing you may not, but do you have any other plans in this space or any further research or any projects on the way, or is that one and done for you both?
Well, Javier is in a kind of betting market right now.
Well, it's not betting, it's lending, but in the sense that it is a statistical facts that you have to take. You have to estimate the the default rate and all of that. In that sense, it's similar, and that you make many loans. So in that sense, so from the data scientist or probabilistic aspect, it's similar. And also the insurance industry is sort of similar, right? So yeah, if we will do something with this in the future, maybe if we come up with a great idea or that we think, oh, maybe this works, and then we try it, maybe we will. It was definitely fun for me until we got lost.
What was the most useful takeaway? And maybe for someone that hasn't had the time to read the paper, and it may even be something we've already discussed, but what was the one thing you took away from this whole 2-year process that you would like to share?
Well, from the paper, you mean, or in general?
Yeah, just in general. One thing that stands out to you, whether it's a negative thing or a positive thing.
Well, I would say a positive thing is that a simple strategy like this can beat the bookies, at least in theory. But in real life, I would say the takeaway is that this cannot be deployed, this strategy. So to me, that's a takeaway. So it works in theory, but not in practice. There's a gap between theory and reality here.
Yeah, so there's a gap between what you can simulate and when you go to the real world, there are other issues that might prevent you from doing what you expected to do. And this is in general in many things in life, right? The amount of effort that to put into practice an idea is considerable, and you have to be very motivated and
persistent.
Absolutely. No, I know those who follow Nassim Taleb would probably be nodding their head in agreement. But I want to thank you both for your time to come and chat. I'm just going to mention again the paper is called "Beating the Bookies with Their Own Numbers and How the Online Sports Betting Market is Rigged." And obviously there's the blog post as well, which is a bit shorter. I think it's called "Beating the Bookies and Is It Worth It?" So I'll put links to those up so people who are interested who want to read through. And like you mentioned, there's some mathematical and scientific aspects in the exhibits as well to go through exactly what you did. So thank you very much both for your time today. It was great to chat about your research and your betting.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jake. It was great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.